and a former advisor to Tony Blair, and Lionel Barber, who is the editor of the Financial Times. Very carefully worded story. You say he's stepping back from this role. Does that mean you expect him to give it up this week? Or
his present role is no longer tenable. He's understood that high-profile role, seeking to focus on economic development in the Palestinian territories, but also with some political role at the same time. And the fact is that the relationship between Mr. Blair and key Palestinian leaders has broken down. With President Abbas, that's shot. Also, the Europeans, we have a new Italian High Representative, have given up on Mr. Blair. And there are some people close to the Secretary of State who also don't think that Mr. Blair is effective. Having said that, Mr. Blair is very keen to remain engaged and to be given some kind of job, even if it's very informal.
I mean, he's been doing this for 8 years now. Has it been a bit of a waste of time, to be honest?
No, it hasn't. Look, the role has been described in the media as the sort of quote-unquote peace envoy. In reality, his role was never to do a sort of Northern Ireland-style negotiation. His role was to focus on the economic development of the Palestinian Authority to prepare the Palestinians for statehood. And there have been some successes, but it's no secret that he would have liked that work to have progressed far further and faster, as you can see from the speech that he made in Gaza just a couple of weeks ago, where he addressed all of these issues.
I mean, has the problem been, frankly, that he's mixed business with diplomacy, personal business with diplomacy?
I should be clear. We had long discussions with the Blair camp, and I was also in Jerusalem just 3 years ago, that Mr. Blair insists that there is no mixing of the two, and that he's taken legal advice, accounting advice. Having said that, there is a sharp recognition that wearing these two hats just doesn't work, because Mr. Blair has important consultancy work, lucrative consultancy work in the Middle East. He's also close to the Abu Dhabi, UAE, the Saudis, and to be an impartial interlocutor, you just can't blur these roles. And I think that's something that's made people in Washington and in Brussels extremely uncomfortable.
See, this is the bit of Lionel's story I'm afraid I fundamentally disagree with. I think the whole business interests angle is an entire red herring.
But I mean, you read his story, he's got quotes. It's not the Financial Times saying this.
Look, I'm sure the Financial Times is perfectly actually...
Does he talk about the Middle East peace, or does he talk about the next contract?
I'm sure the Financial Times has perfectly accurately reported what was said to them. At the same time, Tony Blair was meeting with John Kerry in Sharm el-Sheikh on Saturday to talk about the role and how it goes forward. Look, there's been a conversation going on here that is far bigger than about Tony's personal role, which is about the whole role of the Quartet as a whole. Frankly, the organisation has been a pretty busted organisation for a number of years. The best route in terms of the Middle East is the Arab Peace Initiative that was set out a few years ago. It's bizarre that in terms of the international negotiations, there's no partnership with the Arab League, with the broader regional players. That's what Tony Blair wants to use, and actually use those relationships that actually are a strength rather than a negative, as Lionel calls them.
Do you think he's really playing a political price, in as much as I understand it, one of the people that he did get on well with was Netanyahu? And if Netanyahu's coming to the end of his term leading the Israeli government, then Blair's not going to be a very useful conduit.
Mr. Blair does have a close relationship with Netanyahu, and it's not his fault that many people resent that. He also claims to have a very good relationship with the new Egyptian president, Sisi, and has made clear that he no longer believes in sort of democracy throughout the region. There are some problems associated with that following the Arab Spring. But I just want to come back to two salient facts. The first is Mr. Blair really wanted a job after Downing Street. George Bush gave him that job as a favour. But the terms of the job were never clear. Mr. Blair wanted something much...
entirely clear.
Excuse me, it's not. Where is it written down?
The mandate was published at the time he was appointed in June 2007.
Has there been a regular review?
Yes, it's the Quartet meeting.
The terms of this job have never been clear.
That is categorically untrue, Lionel. The terms of the job were published in June 2007 when he was published. We've always been clear on what the nature of the role was.
And he's understood now that, without political progress, the economic progress is saddled. And
it's certainly true. It's certainly true that there is a frustration that the economic track has not been uncoupled from the politics. That's why we need to look at what he said in Gaza.
It's also the case, unfortunately, that the one entity who has clearly benefited from this is Tony Blair, in as much as he's had access to the world leaders of today, to the Elysee, to the White House, because of this job, and he's also had the diplomatic.
Hang on a minute. This is a role that takes up the vast majority of his time. He does it unpaid.
The vast majority of his time.
He does it unpaid in terms of the sort of work that he engages in. You know, I know from the time that I spent out there, the amount of time he spends in the region. What's important now is that we bring in the regional players and we look at how we can actually get the sort of politics and economics working together.
How much time do you think he was giving to it?
I don't believe that it's the majority of his time. He has made, back in 2012, he made 80 trips, but recently, more recently, I cannot support that notion that it's the majority of his time. It's quite true, it's unpaid, but and this has been a story I've been working on for at least 2 months, talking regularly to people, they just don't feel he was effective anymore, and they're worried about the perception.
But he's spoken about this publicly himself, about the need for a change in the role.
What he says. I'm afraid we are going to have to stop it there. Thank you very much indeed.